All right, now let's get to the heart of the matter, what you've all been waiting for. Let's talk about how to interpret the planets in your birth chart. I want to start by telling you what to watch out for, okay? Because the biggest and most commonly made mistake that anyone will ever make in reading a chart or trying to understand anything actually is to be out of context. Really, you're always going to screw everything up if you let yourself get out of context. That's the biggest struggle that we all need to make all the time, is to keep ourselves in context, whether you're interpreting a word or an action or a movement or a gesture or a planet in a sign. You always need to keep that symbol that you're interpreting in its context. If you isolate the symbol from its environment, you're very, very, very likely to misunderstand it. So, for example, you get a lot of people saying, I have Mars in my 7th house. My marriage is always going to suck. Because they heard somewhere the accurate information that Mars in the 7th house is pretty difficult for marriage. That information in and of itself is accurate, that Mars in the 7th house is difficult for marriage. But that doesn't mean that if you have Mars in the 7th house, you're going to have a difficult marriage. Or it's always going to suck, let's put it that way. Why? Is it because you can't trust anything in astrology? No. It's because when you paint on a canvas, you don't use the colors straight out of the tube. You mix the colors first, right? When you study astrology and you learn what Mars is like in the 7th house, you just get a color in a tube. You're not supposed to use that color directly on the canvas of your interpretation. You have to mix it with other colors, like what's the color of Mars in that sign that it's in. Mix those two things together. Okay? Then you get a more rich color, a more accurate color, a more individualized color for every single chart that you're looking at. And then you get more accurate, rich, detailed, sophisticated interpretations. If you see a chart, or if it's your chart and you got Mars in the 7th house and you think, whoa, I wonder what's going on with the marriage for this person, right? Well, the first stop that you should do is look at every other thing in this chart. Look at everything else that's about the same topic. If you're a judge and you are holding a court and a lawyer brings one witness before you and the witness says, yeah, I saw this guy steal the cookies from the store, would you say, okay, the trial is over, I sentence this person to 5 months in jail? Just from hearing from one witness? You want to hear from multiple witnesses who all have something to do with the event in question, right? Same thing when you're reading an astrology chart. You don't just want to look at a planet in the 7th house and give your interpretation about the person's marriage. You want to look at multiple factors that have to do with marriage. So for example, also look at Venus. Also look at the 7th Lord. Also look at the moon's 7th house and Lord. Also look at the signs and nakshatras that have to do with marriage. Look at the sweet nakshatras, enduring nakshatras. Look at the Venus signs, for example. Look at the Amsha charts that have to do with marriage, which would be the 7th and the 9th, Saptamsha and Navamsha. Look at the Amsha charts that have to do with everything, like the Shashtamsa, the 60th, right? Or some of the other ones that are very high, like the 45. But even simpler, even before you go into all these details, at least, don't just say Mars in the 7th house, this person's marriage is going to suck. At least think about other things related to Mars. What kind of aspects does Mars get? What kind of aspects does Mars give? How important is Mars in that chart? At the very least, think about what sign Mars is in. What kind of dignity does Mars have? How does Mars operate, function in that sign, in the 7th house? All right, so now let's look at a few examples. Let's look at 3 examples just to make this clear. The first example, let's look at this anonymous person. As you can see, indeed, they do have Mars in the 7th house. But this is a Mars in Cancer, okay, which means that it is going to be the 11th and the 4th Lord in the 7th house, and it's going to be debilitated. Their 7th Lord is also in the 12th. We're not just going to look at Mars in the 7th, we're going to look at the fact that Mars is in Cancer in the 7th, right? So therefore it's debilitated, and it's the 4th and 11th lord. Then we're going to look at the 7th lord. Well, it's in the 12th house. Okay, so not only do we have Mars in the 7th house debilitated, we also have the 7th lord in the 12th. Look at Venus also. We also have Venus in the 8th, okay? This is a chart of a person who does have a problem forming a partnership. But the specifics of how they have a problem with it is that they've married an indulgent and weak person. The 7th house has a debilitated planet in it, and the 7th lord is in the 12th house. So this suggests a weak spouse. The 11th lord is in the 7th house, so this is debilitated, right? So this suggests an indulgent spouse. And Venus in the 8th house is not just hidden or mysterious or secretive, but also indulgent. So it's kind of a secretive, withdrawn, and indulgent and weak spouse, therefore a difficulty having a good marriage. It doesn't mean that their marriage always sucks. It doesn't mean that they have a bad marriage. This person has a long-standing marriage, but is very, very tolerant and has to be pretty independent from the spouse, because the spouse is incapable of forming a true partnership, a true peer-to-peer relationship. Okay, here's another anonymous example I'd like to show you. Here we have Mars in the 7th house, but now it's in Leo, not a Cancer like the previous example. So now Mars in Leo is more independent. And Mars in Leo in the 7th house means that this is the 10th lord. Mars is the 10th lord and the 3rd lord. So now instead of the 4th and 11th lord in the 7th house, we have the 10th and the 3rd lord in the 7th house. Their 7th lord is in the 5th house, which is not so bad, right? It's an intellectual house, and it's in Gemini, an intellectual sign. And Venus is also doing pretty well, although with Ketu, which is supporting some certain withdrawal. But Venus is in the 4th house in its own sign, surrounded by benefics. So what you get here, this particular person also has, just like you would expect from Mars in the 7th house, a problem forming intimate or romantic partnership. But it doesn't really affect this person so much, because they're more interested in other things. Specifically, they're more interested in intellectual pursuits, which you see from the 7th lord going to Gemini in the 5th house. Or career-ish type things, which you see from the 10th lord being in the 7th house as Mars. And this person doesn't really wind up feeling starved for love, because they have a great Venus in the 4th house. So they have other outlets for affection. So yeah, this person has Mars in the 7th house, and sure enough, this is an unmarried person. But it's not devastating to this person's life. The person is quite okay with it most of the time. So you see, it really made quite a difference whether Mars was in the 7th house in Cancer or Mars was in the 7th house in Leo. And then on top of that, the other placements, like where is the 7th lord and where's Venus. Now, let's look at an example that everybody knows, John Lennon. He also has Mars in the 7th house, right? His Mars is in Libra in the 7th house, which is a particular flavor. Mars in Libra tends to take away the masculinity. And also it's there with the Sun in Libra, which also takes away the masculinity, right? So he's got Mars in Libra. That makes it the 1st and the 8th lord, very different than the others. So now it's the 1st lord in the 7th house, the 8th lord in the 7th house, in Libra as Mars. His Venus was also the 7th lord. They're both in the 6th house, debilitated. So sure enough, John Lennon is a little difficult to form a partnership with. But look at that Mars carefully. Now, if you know how to find Raj Yogas, you'll see a gold mine here involved with that Mars. This Mars in John Lennon's chart is involved in 5 Raj Yogas, at least I can see off the top of my head. This is an incredible amount of Raj Yoga going on in the 7th house, right? And if you look at this from the moon's perspective, a couple of those Raj Yogas continue to exist with Mars and Rahu and the Sun and Rahu, even from the moon's perspective. So these are very, very deep, powerful Raj Yogas that he has in his 7th house. So sure, he has Mars in Libra in his 7th house, but this isn't going to be like somebody else who has Mars in Libra in his 7th house, because he has Mars in Libra in the 7th house with Rahu and the Sun. So he's got all kinds of Raj Yogas supporting this Mars and Libra in the 7th house. So even though, yes, he's a difficult person to get along with, he has problems in his relationship, he was too independent for his relationship, but yet he was able to overcome those things by finding a foreign woman who was unusually strong and masculine. And then they had an intense, difficult, but amazing relationship. So all of our example charts had Mars in the 7th house. But all of them have very different experiences related to marriage. All of them had the common theme of Mars, the symbol of independence, in the 7th house, the symbol of partnership. That's a clash, right? I'll go over this in the next episode, how to sort out the basics of a symbolic interpretation. But Mars is basically representing independence, and it's in a house of dependence. So that's a clash that makes a problem. The problem is being too independent for your relationships. So all three of these people have problems with their relationships, and they have to be more independent from a relationship than you would ideally want to be. But that's the end of the similarity between the three. One of them has a long-standing marriage, but to a kind of a weaker person. Another one just has no marriage, but is more interested in other things. And another one had an amazing but intense and difficult marriage, which was very successful in the end, due to all the other factors involved in their chart that pertain to the same topic, marriage. And we didn't even look at a lot of things. I'm just showing you the basics. So what I wanted to do by showing you these three things before getting into specifics about how to interpret planets in charts, I wanted to really make a point so that you could see how important it is not to take anything out of context, to always look around at the whole entire context of everything that's related to the issue that you're examining. So now that we've done that, in the next several episodes in this video series, we'll go into more specifics about how to interpret planets and signs, and we'll go through some combinations in famous people's charts and unknown people's charts as well, to give you examples and show you how to put it all together, and show you how I'm doing it in my astrology and how I do it in my complete birth chart assessment, which you can get as a report. So if you have that report and you're following this video series, you can really get the most out of that report that you got from me. If you don't have that report yet, go get one. What are you waiting for? You can go to victorcara.com/R2. That's the shortcut to get there. All right, thank you. Subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the series, and I'll see you soon with another video. Thanks so much.